If you have these players on your fantasy team, you should be panicking. Welcome back, Endgame community. It's Chris, and let's talk about some players that are probably causing you to panic. Let's start with running backs and David Montgomery. In the 2 games since he returned from injury, only a combined 17 fantasy points. This offense is a mess, right? We were really excited to see Justin Fields kind of had made some progressions there for the past 2 weeks, and then here in week 11, he looked terrible, took an injury, left the game. Dalton came in. That didn't help matters at all. So David Montgomery is certainly going to be handicapped by this offense, or the lack thereof. You know, he's not heavily involved in the passing game the way we would like. Not really a lot of play opportunities to go along here. Not really a lot of chances for touchdowns either. Certainly, if you have David Montgomery, you were excited when he came back, thinking you have an every week RB2. Now you got to really wonder about that. I think he's just going to be kind of a touchdown dependent guy from here on out. On the plus side, he is getting the bulk of the work, but on the downside, he's a bear. All right, another kind of volume-based running back, James Robinson, has really been living off of touchdowns lately, but similar to David Montgomery, there's just not enough snaps or plays to make him incredibly fantasy relevant outside of touchdowns. Even here in week 11, with the touchdown, he still couldn't even get you 12 PPR fantasy points. So while he's not killing you because he's finding the end zone, he's also another guy that we have to accept is just a very touchdown dependent running back. Now on the plus side, he has an incredibly nice playoff schedule. So as long as he keeps getting the work, he could return better value when it matters most in the playoffs. But down the stretch here, at least in the short term, he's probably just going to be a very touchdown dependent running back. And then one more running back, Miles Sanders, was activated off IR, got the start, was doing, okay, nothing special, and then he fumbled and got benched. And my real panic level here is twofold. Number one, you have to really wonder, does Nick Sirianni want to play Miles Sanders? Let's not forget, when Miles Sanders was healthy earlier in the year, they didn't even run the ball. It wasn't until he got hurt that they started using Boston Scott and Jordan Howard in the run game. Then he comes back this week, fumbles one time, and he's relegated to the bench. So I really wonder, does Nick Sirianni even want to play Miles Sanders? And number two, Jalen Hurts, who had 3 rushing touchdowns on the day. That is never a good thing for running backs because we know Jalen Hurts is going to vulture a lot of touchdowns from these running backs. So the fact that he doesn't seem to have the confidence from his coach and he's got a quarterback who will vulture touchdowns, you have to be really panicked about Miles Sanders. If you were looking forward to him coming back and potentially being an every week RB2 for you down the stretch, I think those dreams are dashed. It's probably just going to be a lost season for Miles Sanders in 2021. Let's move on to wide receivers, and I hate to say it, but A.J. Brown, you got to be panicking at this point if you have A.J. Brown. This was the week against Houston where we were going to see the A.J. Brown we saw the first 3 weeks after the injury, and it just didn't happen. Now, granted, he left the game once with a hand injury, and then he left the game for good in the second half with some type of shoulder injury. But even up to that point, it wasn't like he was tearing it up. Yes, he was getting the targets. They weren't amounting to much, right? He wasn't catching a high percentage of his targets. Now he has a shoulder injury, another injury he's going to have to deal with. Even if he plays next week, probably going to be less than 100%. This offense looked really bad against the Texans. As much as I love A.J. Brown and as much as I was hyping him up as a potential league winner down the stretch, and it could still happen, I think right now at this point you have to start panicking a little bit about what you're going to get week to week from A.J. Brown. And then another wide receiver, not quite on the level of A.J. Brown, but that is Brandon Cooks. This was a smash spot going against the Titans, the worst secondary in the NFL as far as giving up points to wide receivers. And in a game his team won, he got 3 targets and 2 catches. Not the target share we were looking for from Brandon Cooks. The Texans didn't really have to do a lot on offense in this game because the Titans couldn't do anything on offense. And Tyrod Taylor did rush in 2 scores. So I'm not panicking too high here on Brandon Cooks, but I think you just have to accept that this is who he's going to be. In a Texans offense like this, he's going to be very volatile week to week. So normally in a matchup like this, you should feel good playing him. It didn't happen this week, but I think going forward, when he has plus matchups, you can feel fairly confident playing him. Probably going to need to avoid him in the tougher spots. And then a couple of tight ends, and honestly, I really hate that I have to keep talking about this guy, but Kyle Pitts, another miserable week. Look, and I'm not picking on Kyle Pitts. I think Kyle Pitts is going to be a fantastic player in the NFL, but his situation is terrible right now. The offense is a mess. Matt Ryan has no time to throw, and when he does, he doesn't look that great throwing the ball. The big thing to me is Calvin Ridley is out. If you have Kyle Pitts, you should be hoping Calvin Ridley comes back, because with Calvin Ridley out, Kyle Pitts is having to go against teams' number 1 and number 2 corners rather than their linebackers or their safeties, as he would in a traditional tight end slot. Not to mention, this offense can't support him. There's not enough volume here because the offense can't move the ball. But I think going forward, he's going to be an extremely volatile, boom bust tight end that you probably have to start most weeks because you don't have better options, but it's going to make you panic every time you see him in your lineup. And then a tight end who is becoming a dependable high floor tight end, Dan Arnold. He was a popular streaming option this week. He led the Jaguars in receiving and targets, looked like a nice safe option, and then he had no targets, no points. Going to be tough in this offense. Jamal Agnew did suffer what looked to be a knee injury in this game. The opportunity should still be there for him, but again, it's the Jaguars. This offense is the farthest thing from a fantasy-friendly offense as you can get. Just not a lot of upside here, not a lot of opportunity. Probably can put Dan Arnold back on your waiver wire unless you really have no other good options. And then finally, a QB, well, it's got to be Ryan Tannehill, right? No Derrick Henry, no A.J. Brown, and we saw what happened. Even Marcus Johnson left this game early with a hamstring injury. 4 interceptions against the mighty Houston Texans defense. And now there's uncertainty with A.J. Brown going forward. Is he going to miss games? If he does, there's just no way you can start Ryan Tannehill. He has no weapons around him. If A.J. Brown comes back, that'll help a little bit, but still, without Derrick Henry, without a true number 2 wide receiver, it's really hard to consider Ryan Tannehill as a startable fantasy football quarterback, especially in 10 or 12 team leagues. So if you picked him up this week to stream him against the Texans, which made sense, you can drop him again, and you probably don't need to start him the rest of the season. All right, guys, that does it for Panic Players. Appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.